Before I start this story, I just want to tell you guys that I did get COVID, so if I do sound a little different, that's why. And you may be asking, why the fuck am I making a video if I have COVID? Well, I have to quarantine for 5 days, so what else do you want me to do? Just sit in bed and do nothing? That does sound kind of fun, but I can't just do that for 24 hours straight. My brain is gonna go nuts. More nuts than it already is, so here we go, I guess. It was the day of a friend's birthday party which I had looked forward to for a long time. During this time of my life, I discovered psychedelics, mainly mushroom truffles which I acquired via the internet. Since I had them sent to me by mail, which wasn't legal, I was always quite anxious about anyone finding out. I had planned a dose during the birthday party to have an amazing time, which I always had, doing it exclusively at home, listening to music and discovering the other world of Jimi Hendrix and the Doors. My stash was empty and I had ordered a bag of truffles, which was on its way since over a week. Evening was closing in, and slowly but surely, I came to peace with the package not arriving this busy Friday. I was really angry and disappointed at the prospect of not being able to drop on the party, as I felt just like a rider on the storm discovering this great new thing which made me feel happy, less anxious, and depressed, and gave me new knowledge and understanding of how the world truly works. I prepared to walk down the staircase and out of the house, disappointed that I would probably just end up lying on a bathroom floor drunk to hell like last time. But as I walked down, I could see an envelope lying in the milky glass of the mailbox. Intense heartbeats followed great euphoria as I saw that it was addressed to my name, and I could already feel what was inside. My day was saved. It would be just like a movie. I would go to Woodstock this evening and dance around the campfire with my friends, having the most amazing time. When I arrived at my friend's place, my stoner buddy, I wasn't smoking, was already there, and I tried making a mental map of when to drop the truffles I had with me, as I wanted to peek during the later evening when stuff was going down. We went outside the property as to not make my friend's parents aware that anyone smoked weed, and so on the way into the fields via a curved road lit by lanterns, I started snacking down truffle after truffle from my pocket. Overall, it was about 15 grams. I had a bit of a tolerance, so this dose didn't seem out of the ordinary. Most I had taken before was around 10 grams, but I wanted to have a real great time, hence I upped the dose. The slightly weird, acidic, and specific taste of the truffles filled my mouth. Not too bad, but also not pleasant. Kind of like nuts mixed with lemon, but in a bad way. My friend started lighting his blunt and he offered it to me. As I never really smoked anything in my life, I took a few puffs and handed it back, probably leaving me with no to little effect of the weed. It must have been around 20 minutes and I already felt different. This was weird to me as I usually never felt anything so shortly after ingesting the truffles. Lights seemed bright, and I felt this bubbling feeling in my stomach as if something was getting excited within me. When we arrived at the house, we sat down in my friend's busy garden filled with people in a party tent on a beach. A candle lit the whole thing and 80s music was running in the background. I don't remember much about how it all started, but I remember staring at the candle on the table. Something wasn't right about it. I continued talking to my friends sitting at the table and looking around, when all of a sudden, it felt like my ears disconnected from the rest of my body. This weird buzz, this humming, this high-pitched sound almost like tinnitus filled my ears. I could see my friends' mouths moving, but couldn't connect the sounds they made to any language I had ever heard. Panic started to set in as I looked at the table, which moved in a threatening manner. These visuals were picking up immensely. The glass in which the candle sat started warping and flying around the table. I looked up and the party lights made it look like the tent was flying, and also like shadows were crawling over the whole thing. At this point I knew that I fucked up hard. No one knew I had taken anything, and I knew that this was just the beginning of who the hell knew what type of trip. Intense fear started taking over me, and I must have looked quite shook. Anyways, my friends left the table, leaving me alone while I was absolutely horrified about what was going to happen to me. Did I fuck up? Would I forever stay like this? Did I take a trip too far? What would I do now? An immense feeling of impending doom came over me as the world around me stopped making sense. People standing around were looking like they had hidden plans to plot against me. Everyone knew all of a sudden that I was on something. I could read their thoughts after all. The police would arrive any second to arrest me, so I had to get away. I stood up from the table and left the party tent. I was unable to identify any faces at this point and was scared shitless that anyone would see me like this, so I decided to take off from the party. All my surroundings were entirely alien, and I could not identify any spot or place I had previously been at before. I started walking through town towards the dark to hide myself from people who were obviously trying to do horrible things to me. I remembered the path me and my buddy took before and felt a connection to it. I walked down the curved lantern-lit path towards a spot we had previously been at. Time stopped making sense, and the curve became ever steeper while the lantern started bending over me like fangs trying to catch me. I started walking faster and faster, paranoia-driven that at any second someone would grab me from behind. The curved path felt like I had rotated around myself multiple times at this point as nothing made sense. I was becoming increasingly aware that I had royally messed up this time. At some point, I entered the dark as no more lanterns lit the path. My fear was at the point that I thought I was going to literally die. I was over 10 miles from home, and I understood that it was physically impossible for me to walk home like this. I started walking into the vineyards, up the rows in the dirt. I constantly felt things touching me left and right, and could physically hear sirens and other auditory hallucinations haunting and preying on me. I had chromatic aberrations in my field of view that split every real object into a thick layer of blue and red, separated from each other while everything was morphing constantly. I must have walked for about an hour when I came to any sense again and realized I had walked through bushes and dirt, and I was essentially entirely drenched and dirty. I was on top of a hill outside the village and could look down to where my friend's house was. I didn't know how I ended up here and felt like I would never be able to go back now. I got the idea that if I forced myself to throw up, then maybe the trip would stop and it would all go away. I got to my knees and pushed my fingers into my mouth. Doing this while high on mushrooms was probably one of the most disgusting feelings ever. Even though I was extremely committed in throwing up, I just couldn't. My mind was literally melting as the trip got stronger and stronger, and I lost complete touch with reality. I threw the baggie in which the truffles had been into a sewer and made sure it was fully gone. After all, it would be picked up by agents who would investigate me doing other drugs, and I had to hide it as best as I could. They might fingerprint or DNA test the baggie and track me down. At this point, I was fully psychotic and could not tell reality from the hallucinations. I was constantly teleported forward and backwards in never-ending loops, walking around the same place over and over again. I constantly lost my phone in my own pocket and had to stop and try to recover it. I had activated fly mode so no one would track my location or try and call me. A light was moving towards me from behind. I was done for. The Secret Service would scream to put my hands behind my head any second now. I had to flee. I threw myself into the side of the field to duck down from the beam of light trying to track me. The suspicious van, just a random dude, drove by and I was safe from the eternal torture they would subject me to. As I was walking without any goal in mind, I looked at the stars. This was something that calmed me. It was a beautiful clear night, and the blue and red stars were soothing to the point I was one with them. I physically floated towards them and was drawn and teleported into space and onto the moon, which I looked at. Gravity was pulling me in and out of the state of 0G. I didn't know if I was going up or down or if my journey would end ever. Maybe I was dead already and walking through limbo. I was crying at this point, completely helpless and fearful of what was going on. I felt like a kid lost in the supermarket while his mom suddenly disappeared, except I was drenched and high in the middle of the fields. Eventually, I understood that I needed help and that the only way out of here was to call one of my buddies who didn't know I took something. I called, and after the phone rang for what felt like an eternity and me having to confess and ask for help, I said to my friend that I wasn't feeling all right and that I needed help. He asked where I was, and I might as well have answered in hell. We tried navigating around and trying to track down my location, which I of course could not give any input about. Eventually, I decided to simply start walking back to town. As I came back and entered civilization, everything was alien. The facades of the dark houses looked like faces looking down upon me, judging. Cars looked like foreign technology, like bugs on the road, and the lantern's light was odd. It was like I could not pinpoint the exact color they were shining in. Eventually, my friend told me to stop fucking around with him and go read a street name so he could come pick me up. I was standing 1 meter in front of the street sign, but had to squint my eyes and tell him letter by letter to even tell him how it was called. At this time, an airplane flew over somewhere in the sky and it felt like Valkyries coming down on me. The sound of it was right in my ears, immensely loud and threatening. It sounded like it was 20 meters above me and the sound had infinite reverb, but it wasn't. My friend told me to come to the train station, and so I stumbled there. A train came in, and for some reason I thought I had to get onto the train, so I started running to catch it while my friend screamed at me through the phone to not get into the fucking train. I obeyed and waited until the train was gone before jumping over the tracks without thinking twice. I could have died here, no joke. My friends looked at me while walking back to the party and asked me what the fuck was going on and why I was so dirty and fucked up. I didn't tell them, but they obviously knew something was up. They parked me outside with my stoner buddy as they thought he would be the only one who knew what was up with me. He probably felt really guilty as he must have thought that I had gone schizo or some shit, smoking his blunt, or that I overreacted to it. The rest of the evening was really uneventful. I continued discussing about the universe and the truth of life and other concepts with my friends on the campfire tripping balls. I was just talking absolute insane nonsense. I tell you this story to make sure you are aware of the dangers of not following safe use protocol when using psychedelics. I should have never tried a higher than before dose in a foreign setting without a trip sitter. I pretty much heard every single rule there is concerning trip safety and paid the price. Don't be stupid like me, and always respect the drug. Even though I woke up the next day feeling drained but normal, it might not end this lucky for you, and you might have to deal with severe mental issues following the experience. Stay safe. Psychedelics are no joke. Even though this was my only bad trip among a ton of amazing ones, a bad trip is always 10 times worse than an amazing trip does good for you.